Good morning to all. We are discussing computational complexity. So, under this computational complexity, we have discussed the decidability. So, when the problem is said to be decidable, and when the problem is it is said to be undecidable, then also the problem is categorized into solvable problem and unsolvable problem. So, if the algorithm exists or if a particular method exists, then we can say that it is a solvable one. And if no algorithm is there or no fixed method is there, so we can say that it is an unsolvable problem. Getting this point. So here today we are going to start the next concept. That is nothing but the halting problem of Turing machine. As you know that Turing machine is the automata, the most powerful automata amongst all. That is as compared to your NFA, DFA, the PDA, NPDA, DPDA. So this two and the post machine, this Turing machine is very much powerful of doing the operations. So we'll see the halting problem which deals with the Turing machine. So let us see the what exactly is the problem and what exactly is the solution given to this halting problem. So let us see here. To state halting problem, we will consider the given configuration of a Turing machine. The output of Turing machine can be halt. So as you know that when the string is being accepted by the Turing machine enters into the halt state, or we can say that just like our finite automata, the automata enters into the final state. The same way, the Turing machine enters into the halt state if it accepts a particular string. If it accepts a particular string. So the machine starting at this configuration will halt after a finite number of states. So definitely after a certain amount of state, after following certain number of states, the machine enters into the halt state or the halting state. The second is nothing but the no halt. No halt in the sense that the machine starting at this configuration never reaches a halt state. The machine never reaches halt state means it enters into the infinite loop. It enters into the infinite loop no matter how long it runs. So it runs. So it enters into the infinite loop. So basically two states are there, that is a halt state for the Turing machine and the no halt state for the Turing machine, where it will never enter into the halting state, it will never stop, it will enter into the infinite loop, right? So how to state the problem. So now from the question arises based on these two observation is that given any functional matrix, input data type and initial configuration, then is it possible to determine whether the process will ever halt? That is the problem. So what is the actual halting problem of the machine is that this is called as the halting problem. So problem is that for a given input matrix, for the given functional matrix, for the given transitions and the input data type, you have the input given and the initial configuration, whatever may be the current configuration of the Turing machine. Is it possible to determine whether the process will ever halt or whether the Turing machine will halt or not, whether it enters into the halt state or not? That is nothing but the problem, and this is called as your halting problem of the Turing machine, right? So that means we are asking for a procedure which enable us to solve the halting problem for every pair, that is machine and tape, and the answer is no, and the answer is no. So what we have to do here, we are asking a particular procedure, we have to find out a procedure, we have to find out the method, or we have to write down an algorithm. In simple way we can say that we have to write down an algorithm which enable us to solve the halting problem. We have to solve the halting problem for every pair, that is machine as well as tape, and the answer is no, we are not able to find out this, right? So how? So let us see, that is the halting problem. So that means the halting problem is unsolvable. So remember this point. So if there is a question halting problem, so one do not have a proper fixed methodology or do not have a proper set of one can say fixed methods or algorithmic steps to solve the halting problems, that is nothing. So that's why it is called as the unsolvable problem of the halting problem of the Turing machine. Getting this point. So let us see here. Now we will prove why it is unsolvable. We have to prove, we have to justify. If we are saying that it is an unsolvable problem, then justification must be there. So see how the justification is given. Let there exist a Turing machine M1 which decides whether or not any computation by a Turing machine T will ever halt when a description dt of a Turing machine T and the tape T of the Turing machine T is given. That means the input to the machine M1 will be machine and tape. We are providing the input to the machine in the form of dt pair. So then for every input pair, that is T dt to machine M1, if T halt for input small t, M1 also halts, which is called as accept halt, which is called as the accept halt. Right, means the condition is true, or one can say the input is being accepted by the Turing machine and the machine enters into the halt state. Similarly, if T does not halt, if the machine or the Turing machine does not enter into the halt state for input T, then machine M1 will halt, which is called as the reject halt. It is also called as the reject halt. If that input is not being accepted by the machine, it is rejected, though it rejects that particular input, but still it is entered into the halting state, or it stops its processing at the halt state. Means it will never enter into the infinite loop. It never enters into the infinite loop. It is shown in the figure here. See this figure. So working of the Turing machine is shown here. The input applied here, T comma dt, the input is given to the Turing machine M. So this is one possibility, is the accept halt, and the second is nothing but the reject halt. So accept halt means what? So if the T halt for the input T, M1 also halts, which is called as the accept halt, and the reject halt in the sense that the Turing machine does not halt for the input T, then machine M1 will halt, which is called as the reject halt, So next point here is when T halts. So first accept halt is nothing but when T halts when T, that is Turing machine, halts for input T and T does not halt for input T. Getting this point? So now we will consider another Turing machine. Consider the second one, that is capital M2, which takes an input dt. The input is in the format d underscore t. So it first copies dt and duplicates dt. So see here, we are now considering the second machine, Turing machine, that is M2. So it first copies dt and the duplicates dt on its tape, and then this duplicated tape information is given to input machine M1. So now the two Turing machines are considered here. The first is nothing but M2 and second is M1. So first, so it first copies dt and duplicates this information dt, and this tape and the duplicated tape information is given to the machine M1. Then it is supplied to machine M1. But machine M1 is a modified machine with the modification that whenever M1 is supplied to reach an accept halt, M2 loops forever. Now see the changes here. Now observe the changes carefully. When machine M1 is modified machine with the modification that whenever M1 is supposed to reach to an accept halt state, M2 loops forever. Machine M2 enters into the loop forever, right? So hence behavior of M2 is given below. So it loops if T halts, if the Turing machine T halts for input T equal to dt, and halts if capital T does not halt for T equal to dt. Therefore, the T is an arbitrary Turing machine, where T is your arbitrary Turing machine. So see it once again. Hence, behavior of machine M2, Turing machine M2 is given. So it loops if T halts for input T equal to dt, and halts if T does not halt for T equal to dt. The T is an arbitrary Turing machine. As M2 itself, as machine M2 itself is one Turing machine, we will take M2 equal to T. So we will take capital M2, that is another Turing machine, that is equal to Turing machine T. That means we will replace T by M2. That we are going to replace the machine T by Turing machine 2 from the given machine. So see here from the diagram, see here, this is nothing but your modified. So this is machine M2, this total, it is machine called as a Turing machine M2, and this is modified machine M1, and you are going to supply the dt. T is input is nothing but in the form of dt, and you are going to supply this, you are going to supply the copy of the input to the machine in this format dt comma dt to the modified machine. And when you are supplying this to this modified M1, the output of M2, this is output of M2 is nothing but it loops or it halts. It loops or it halts. Okay. So see here. So T halts for input T equal to dt. So T halts for input T equal to dt, and T does not halt for T equal to dt. So you can say that for loop means this M2 enters into the looping state, or it loop forever. So that is for input T equal to dt, and it does not halt for T equal to dt. So thus machine M2 halts. So we can write here Turing machine M2 halts for input dm2 if M2 does not halt for input dm2. This is a contradiction. So here itself the statement is a contradictory statement. See here. So we can write, so it is written like, thus machine M2 halts for input dm2 if M2 does not halt for input dm2. So what it is nothing but the contradiction of the statement itself. So we can write that means a machine, the Turing machine M1, which can tell whether any other TM will halt on a particular input, does not exist. See it carefully. That means a machine, Turing machine M1, which can tell whether any other Turing machine will halt on a particular input, does not exist. Means no such type of Turing machine exists there. So hence we can say that hence the halting problem is unsolvable. Hence the halting problem of the Turing machine is unsolvable. See the modified diagram here, or see the modified figure for the Turing machine. So you are supplying input in the form of TDT to the Turing machine M2. It enters into the loop, or it goes to the halt state. So when it enters into the loop, when M2 halts for input dm2, and when it enters into the halt state, M2 does not halt for input dm2. So see, this is nothing but the final diagram of the two machine integration, and we have proved that the halting problem of the Turing machine is unsolvable in nature. Getting this point? So if the question is asked, you have to write down all the description, you have to draw these three diagrams, and from this diagram you have to write down the description. And we applied here logic, that is proof by contradiction. This is nothing but your proof by contradiction. So we prove that there is a machine. So we come to the conclusion that there is a machine M2 that halts for input dm2 if M2 does not halt for input dm2, and this statement, it is a contradictory to itself. So if it is a contradiction, so we can say that a machine M1 which can tell whether any other Turing machine will halt on a particular input, it does not exist. Such Turing machine does not exist. Hence we can conclude that halting problem of the Turing machine is unsolvable. And finally we can draw the figure. TDT is the input format Turing machine M2, that inputs the loop, and it also produces halt. So when it enters into the loop, so when M2, that is Turing machine, halts for input dm2, and when it will be in a halting state when it does not halt for the input dm2. So that's all for the halting problem of the Turing machine. Now let us go to the next one, that is the undecidability again. So here we have to see the one problem from the language theory. Undecidable problems from the language theory, and that is nothing but the post correspondence problem, PCP. Just focus on your screen and listen it carefully. So what exactly is the post correspondence problem? So see here, post correspondence problem PCP, it determines undecidability of strings and not the Turing machine. The very first statement, you have to remember that the PCP, or the post correspondence problem, it is a problem and from the language theory. It is the problem from the language theory, and it is related with your strings. It is related with the strings and not the Turing machine. So far we have discussed about the problems. They are related with the Turing machines, or Turing machine it was involved in solving that particular problem. But here we have to see the undecidability related with the strings, So the undecidability of the strings is determined with the help of post correspondence problem, or it is also called as the PCP. So how to define the PCP? Now see, this is the definition of the PCP. Read the definition carefully. The post correspondence problem consists of two lists of the strings that are equal in length over input sigma. So post PCP consists of two lists of strings that are equal in length over input sigma. See here, The two lists are capital A, so this is list A and list B. Capital list A consists of W1, W2, W3 dot 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 Wn. So W1, W2, W3 dot 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 up to Wn. Whereas the list second list B consists of X1, X2, X3 dot 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 up to Xn. Then there exists a non-empty set of integers such that I1, I2, I3 dot dot In such that W1, W2, W3 dot dot Wn equal to X1, X2 means we are concluding that A equal to B, that is nothing but W1, W2 dot dot up to Wn, that is equal to X1, X2 dot dot up to Xn. So that we have to prove if there exist the integers like this I1, I2, I3 dot dot up to In. Getting this point? Now see it once again. See this definition of the post correspondence problem, how the PCP problem is defined. The post correspondence problem consists of two lists of strings that are equal in length over input alphabet sigma. So these lists are A equal to and B equal to, where A consists of your W1 is one string. So W stands for string. So first string, second string, third string, up to n number of strings are there. And also B is another set of strings. So B consists of your X1, X2, X3 dot dot up to Xn. So these are nothing but the two set of strings A and B. So if there exists a non-empty set of integers I1, I2, I3, In such that then there exists a non-empty set I1, I2 up to In such a way that these two set of string W1, W2 dot dot up to Wn, that is equal to X1, X2 dot dot up to Xn. So these are equal if and only if there exists a set of integers I1 to In. So that is the statement of the post correspondence problem, right? So to solve the post correspondence problem, we will try all the combinations of I1, I2, I3 dot dot up to In to find Wi equal to Xi. Means we have to find that each and every string from the first set, that is A, that must be equal to each and every string from the second string in capital B. So then we say that PCP has a solution. So we have to conclude that post correspondence problem has a solution. So if there are a problem, so if there is a problem given, this is solve this problem, whether find out whether this PCP post correspondence problem is having a solution or not, or it is a solvable or not, then we have to try all the combinations of I1, I2 up to In for finding out every string from the first list must be equal to every other string in the second list. So we can say that the PCP has a solution. So every string from set A must be equal to the every string on the set B. So we can say that the PCP has a solution. Getting this point? So that is the concept we have to remember, and we have to solve some examples based on the PCP problems. Means we have to identify whether this PCP is having a solution or not. That also we have to see, right? Now let us go to the next concept, that is nothing but your mapping reducibility. Means you have to map the reducibility concept. Now such type all the concepts are there, that is decidability, undecidability. Then you have the halting problem we have seen. Then now it is nothing but the reducibility. Now reducibility means what? Mapping reducibility means what? That we are going to see. So see it carefully, listen it carefully. Reduction technique. So what exactly is the reduction technique? So reduction is a technique in which if a problem P1, so assume this is the problem P1, reduced to problem P2, then any solution of P2 solves P1. So the statement of the mapping reducibility says that if there are two problems, problem number P1 and problem number P2, and so which if the problem P1 is reduced to problem P2, then solution of P2 also solves P1. Also solves P1 means it is also solution of P1. That we have to see. So that is nothing but the problem of mapping reducibility, or how to prove the mapping reducibility. That it says that it is a technique in which the reduction technique or the mapping reducibility is a technique in which the problem P1 is reduced to problem P2, and the solution of problem P2 solves P1 also, right? So see here, in general, if we have an algorithm to convert an instance of problem P1 to an instance of problem P2 that have the same answer, then it is called as P1 reduces to P2. So very first question is that how to reduce this problem P1 to problem P2. That is the first question. So answer to the question, that is, say for example, if I write here, so P1 reduces to, how the reduction P1 reduces to P2. The answer given is here that if we have an algorithm to convert an instance of problem P1 to an instance of problem P2 that have the same answer, then it is called that P1 is reduced to P2. So we have to find an algorithm, or we have to find a particular method to reduce this particular problem P1 into P2, provided the condition is that the answer for the this P1 instance and answer to this P2 instance, they are same. Then we can say that if the answers of the both instances of the both problems are same, then we can say that yes, the problem P1 is reducible to problem P2, or it reduces to P2. Hence, if P1 is not recursive, now come to our recursive concept. If problem P1 is not recursive, the P2 is also not recursive in nature. Now see the relationship between the recursion. Similarly, if P1 is not recursively enumerable, then P2 is also not recursively enumerable. So see the relation. P1, if it is a recursive, then P2 is also recursive. We can say that, and P1, if it is a recursively, it is not recursively enumerable, that is RE, P2 is also not recursively enumerable. That is the statement. That is the statement made, and we have to prove this statement. Or we can say, if it is a theorem, if we call it as a theorem, then this theorem must have certain proof, or we have to give the proof to prove this sentence. If the P1 is not recursive, then P2 is also not recursive. Similarly, P1 is not recursively enumerable, then P2 is also not recursively enumerable. So let us see here. Theorem, if P1 is reduced to P2, first theorem, if P1 is reduced to P2, then if P1 is undecidable, then P2 is also undecidable. So first condition is given that P2 is reduced to P2. We have to prove that if it is undecidable in nature, then P2 is also undecidable. Undecidable means what? Already we seen that it is nothing but we cannot come to a particular decision. The decision is not possible in case of undecidable problem. No fixed methodology is there. We cannot reach to a proper decision in case of our undecidable problem. So see here, if P1 is non-recursive, it is a non-recursive, and second we have to this is the first one, and this is second one. If P1 is a non-recursively enumerable, then P2 is also non-RE. Non-RE means recursively enumerable. Getting this point? So these two theorem, or these two one can say that points in the theorem we have to prove here. So how to prove? See here. First one, if P1 is undecidable, then problem P2 is also undecidable. So let us see how it is being proved. Consider an instance W. Consider instance W of a problem P1. Very first point. Then construct an algorithm such that the algorithm takes instance W as an input and converts it into another instance of instance X. That instance belongs to problem P2, right? Then apply that algorithm to check whether X is in P2, right? And if algorithm says yes, if this X is belong to P2, then that means X is in P2. Similarly, we can say that W is in P1. W is in P1 since we have obtained P2 after reduction of P1, right? So see what is exactly is the method. So see it once again. So to proof we have to see here for mapping reducibility, the two problems we have considered, and the theorem is given here, and we have to prove this particular theorem. The two parts of the theorem we have to prove separately. P1 is reduced to P2. If this is the condition, if this is given, then we have to prove whether if the P1 is undecidable, P2 is also undecidable. That is the first part. So here we start the proof for the first part. The second part is that if P1 is a non-RE, then P2 is also non-RE. RE means recursively enumerable. If P1 is non-recursively enumerable, P2 is also non-recursively enumerable. So start first. Consider an instance W of P1. Okay. Then construct an algorithm such that algorithm takes instance W as an input and converts it into another instance x of P2. The first point. Second, then apply that algorithm to check whether x is in P2. Apply the same algorithm to check whether x is in P2, and if algorithm answer yes, x is in P2, that means x is in P2 or x is a part of P2. Similarly, we can say that W is in P1. W is in P1. So since we have obtained P2 after reduction of P1, so similarly, if algorithm says no, say no, that means x is not in P2. That is, x is not a part of P2 or it is not belong to problem P2. That also means W is not in P1. So that relates with the W, and we say that W is not the part of P1 or it is not belong to the problem P1. This proves that if P1 is undecidable, P2 is also undecidable. What is the conclusion? So conclusion is that if the problem P1, we could not come to a proper conclusion, if we could not go to a proper decision, on the same way the P2 also could not go to a proper decision. That's why it is undecidable in nature. Getting this point or not? So this proves that if problem P1 is undecidable in nature, definitely P2 is also undecidable in nature. Getting this point? Okay, so now let us go for the second part of the theorem, that is if P1, if problem P1 is non-recursively enumerable, then P2 is also non-recursively enumerable. That we have to see. So let us see how it is proved. Assume that P1 is non-RE. First assumption. So we have to assume P1 is non-RE, but P2 is RE. So this statement we have to remember, because this will use afterwards. So we have to assume that P1 is a non-recursively enumerable, but P2, problem P2 is recursively enumerable. See that, this thing. Now construct an algorithm to reduce P1 to P2, but by this algorithm P2 will be recognized. By this algorithm P2 will be recognized here. So that means there will be a Turing machine. There will be a Turing machine that says yes. If the input is P2, but may or may not halt for the input which is not in P2. So see here, the statements are quite lengthy. They are quite lengthy here, but just be focused, be concentrate, give your concentration. Turing machine that says yes if the input is in P2, but may or may not halt for the input which is not in P2. So Turing machine will say yes, or if it definitely halt for the input that is in P2, but it may halt or it may not halt for the input which is not in P2, problem 2. Getting this point? As we know that one can convert instance of W in P into an instance X in P2. Already in the previous number one part of the theorem, we have seen this. If we have the instance of W in P1, that can be converted into instance X of the problem P2. That is possible. So we can write here, then apply a Turing machine to check whether X is in P2. So we have to just check whether that X is a part of P2 or it belongs to the problem P2. If X is accepted, that also means W is accepted. Means we can say that if X is accepted, X which is part of the problem P2, if it is being accepted, then that also means that that indicates that W, which is the part of your problem P1, that also is accepted. Right? So this procedure describes a Turing machine whose language is problem P1. If W is in P1, then X is also in P2. And if W is not in P1, then X is also not in P2. Let's come again. This procedure describes that a Turing machine whose language is P1, if W is in P1, then X is also in P2. And if W is not in P1, X is also not in P2. So all these things are related. We can say that yes, your W is in P1, that related to X in P2. If W is in problem P1, so definitely means that X belongs to the problem P2. But if the W is not the part of problem P1, so definitely the X is also not the part of problem P2. So this proves that we have to prove P1 is a non-recursively enumerable. Then P2 is also non-RE. So that is the contradiction to our previous statement. We previously assumed that, what is our assumption? Our assumption is that consider P1 is a non-RE, whereas P2 we assume it is a recursively enumerable. But from this discussion or from this proof, we can say that P1 is a non-recursively enumerable. That definitely means that P2 is also non-recursively enumerable. Getting this point? So this is the way how we have proved that if the P1 problem P1 is non-recursively enumerable, then definitely problem P2 is also non-recursively enumerable. Getting this point? So pure theoretical part, you have to just go through it, just read it once or twice so that you will thoroughly understand the concept. Okay. So what we have discussed in this session, that is the halting problem of the Turing machines. So we have to consider the Turing machines, and we have to consider the two Turing machines, and we have to prove that the halting problem of the Turing machine is a unsolvable. It is an unsolvable problem, and we have to give the justification for our statement. Then post correspondence problem we have seen, that is related with your strings. This post correspondence problem, which is related with your string, the set of strings x1, x2, x3, that must be equal to w1, w2, w3. That we have to see, provided that we have to find out the set i1, i2, i3 dot 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 up to in. We have to find out this particular list. And finally, we have discussed the concept of the mapping reducibility. Means there are the two problems, problem P1 and problem P2. If the problem P1 is able to reduce to problem P2, and the P2 the solution of P2 is also provide the solution to P1, then we can say that the problem, yes, problem P1, it is reducible to problem P2. That is the concept of our mapping reducibility. Getting this point? Okay. So course outcome attainment is to express the understanding of the computational complexity. So thank you for the today's session. So let us stop here for the morning session.